Hi guys, welcome back to the Nerd Corner's Top 5 list. I'm Matt, and in light of all the recent Nintendo games that have come out, such as Hyrule Warriors, Smash Brothers, Mario Kart 8, it made me stop and think. I'd like to revisit one of my favorite consoles of all time, the Nintendo 64. So today I'm going to do my top 5 Nintendo 64 games. Number 5 is a game by Rareware, which is now producing Kinect Sports and other games for Microsoft. Yay! My number 5 game is Banjo-Kazooie. Banjo-Kazooie was an innovative game when games were nothing but innovative. It was a game about a bear who had a backpack with a bird in it, and he fought a witch by collecting jigsaw puzzles, music notes, turning into animals with the help of a witch doctor, and collecting whatever the hell Genzos are. It was a great game because it was really fun. It was really mundane tasks, but they made it really fun by using this overarching story of you having to save your sister, Tui. Now, it was just a great game because not only was it one of the best platformers to me, the level design was fantastic in it, and the combat was actually pretty good in an era where combat wasn't all that good. But even though Rare created a lot of great games, such as Donkey Kong 64, Donkey Kong Country, Battletoads, Conker's Bad Fur Day, this one really stood out to me as being just really original, and I'm really glad they took the risk. My number 4 pick happens to be The Legend of Zelda: Ocarina of Time. Now I know what you're thinking, Matt, why isn't that number 1? I'll tell you why. This was a game that I didn't actually play when I was a kid. I played it passingly when I rented it, but I didn't get very far. I think I got to Hyrule Castle and that was pretty much it. But I actually replayed it on the 3DS and beat it on the 3DS, and it's a fantastic game. It was a great game because it had really memorable boss battles, really memorable story, and really it had a lot of heart. It was a time where Nintendo games did have a lot of heart, but again, this one really stood out as having a lot because they took so much storytelling and so much design elements, and they just really loved to make that game. And you can just tell it from everything, from, like I said, the story, from the music, from the gameplay, from the dungeon design, from the enemies. Every piece of that game was good. The only problem I had with that game was a couple of the dungeons kind of stumped me, and that's the reason it's only on my number 4. My number 3 game is Star Fox 64. This game was incredible to me. It had branching paths. It was the first game I played that actually had branching paths. It was very linear. It was a rail shooter, but they made it fun and they made it seem interesting because of all the enemies that were coming at you. They also had a lot of different things. You pressed A to shoot, you pressed B to throw a bomb. It's pretty self-explanatory. And you can do a barrel roll. It had a lot of great side characters and of course a lot of great enemies too. It had Wolf, it had Andross, it had all these enemies that you know and not really love, but you really hate to love. And you had to fight these people. And it was just, it had a lot of memorable bosses because it had like mechas and it had ships and it had giant earthworm things. And it was awesome because when you finally got to the end of that game, you really felt, oh my gosh, I gotta stop Andross. And when you finally did it, when you finally blew him up with that final bomb and you were racing out of there, you were like, wow, that was time well worth spent. My number 2 game was really competitive back in the day, and it's still pretty competitive. It's Mario Kart 64. Mario Kart 64 is actually my favorite Mario Kart. It was the one that I was really good at. It was the one that I memorized all the tracks to, memorized all the shortcuts, all the power-ups, what each power-up did. And it was the first time where I really sat down and studied the game. It was crazy because most people would pick, Mario or Luigi, and I'd always pick the underdog. I'd pick Wario. I still, to this day, in any Mario Kart game, will pick Wario, even though he kind of sucks now. I loved the tracks. The tracks to me were fantastic. Rainbow Road wasn't too difficult back then, and they just kind of ramped up the difficulty a little bit. I loved it because I'd sit down, I'd play it with my friends, and we'd all compete. And that's a game that I still get really competitive about today. I know how to drift, I know how to shoot the red shells, I know when to do what, and it's just a fantastic competitive game because you can sit down and say, I'm the best at what there is, and what I do is racing. And my number 1 Nintendo 64 game is the original Super Smash Brothers. The original Super Smash Bros. Was incredible because it featured a list of all-star Nintendo characters. It was like the Avengers of Nintendo, but they were all fighting each other. That was the first time that ever happened, and that was a really big risk for Nintendo to take. But it was really innovative because it wasn't like the normal Street Fighter fighting. It was more or less like this, platform fighting where you had to knock someone off the stage. I really liked the original Smash Brothers because it wasn't too competitive at the time, honestly. It was just a lot of fun. Still to this day, people compete over it, but even then, like the people who are hardcore competition players, they're not even that hardcore into the original one. They like Melee. I'm not huge into all the changes that have been made to Smash Brothers. I don't like the whole competitiveness of Melee. I don't like the competitiveness of Brawl. I really like this game because it was competitive, but it wasn't to the extreme. It was very fun, light-hearted party game that you picked up and played and said, I'm going to use Pikachu to beat the hell out of Mario because Mario's a little bit gay. And that was my top 5 Nintendo 64 games.